The August afternoon was stifling, the air thick with the humidity that clings to Shanghai like a damp shroud. On the periphery of Hangzhou Airport, a young Chinese sentry was performing the most important duty of his career. He was engaged in absolute mind-numbing boredom while he contemplated the existential dilemma of Shanghai in 1937. Everyone knew war was raging north, yet here, laundry dried on balconies, and conflict was over the price of silk. The Japanese swept through feeble northern defenses with the ruthless efficiency reserved for clearing plates. But Shanghai remained untouched, an international cocktail party determined to ignore the apocalypse outside. Then the script flipped, as a black sedan, driven with the arrogance only a man in a borrowed uniform can muster, appeared. It screeched to a halt at the barrier, and the Chinese soldier snapped to attention, raising his hands in a gesture. The gesture clearly meant stop, because no Japanese allowed, and this is a rule that must be strictly followed. Through the windshield, the face of a Japanese lieutenant appeared, all pinched entitlement and pressed khaki. He was clearly not a fan of rules, so he put the car in reverse, attempting to navigate around the flimsy barrier. He moved as if it were a misplaced traffic cone, so the Chinese soldier, nervous but dedicated, ran forward again. The lieutenant sighed a loud, dramatic exhalation of utter frustration, because this was not supposed to happen. His orders were simple: to be provocative, test the waters, and act like you own the place. So he reached inside. He reached not for diplomatic papers, but for a service pistol. And bang! The shot, sharp and definitive, cut the air. It was a single, petulant sound that would be remembered as the curtain raiser for the bloodiest conflict of the war. The war had not been declared by generals or emperors, but by a minor Japanese officer who could not handle a number. Meanwhile, upriver, in the temporary capital of Nanking, Generalissimo Chiang Kai-shek received the news of the shooting. He was known as Shek the Showman, and he received the news with the glee of a producer whose lead actor has shown up. "Excellent," Shek declared, adjusting the collar of his uniform, which was always starched to perfection in the heat. "It is a perfect spark, messy, undignified, and easily spun. So the Japanese will demand retreat, but we will refuse." His chief of staff looked uneasy, stating, "The Japanese claim this incident justifies full retaliation and mobilizing." He asked if they should continue negotiations, perhaps to buy more time to relocate industry, but Shek scoffed. Shek dismissed the chief of staff with a flick of his hand, asking time for what? To hide our resolve? No, my friend. We have been waiting 8 years for the world to notice us, and the ghastly century of humiliation to end for good. Foreign powers treated China like a leaky teacup, but Shanghai is the stage he strode to, a large map of the city. The map was dominated by the pastel pink of the Western-controlled international settlement, and he tapped it. "The true audience," Shek announced, tapping the settlement, "are those foreign correspondents and diplomats. They are sipping cocktails and reading the Shanghai Times, discussing our inevitable collapse. But we will change it. We will give them a performance that changes the narrative. And this will not be a military defense, but a pageant. This will be the most expensive historical pageant." So Shek laid out his 3-act strategy to impress the critics. The diversion was to throw everything at Shanghai to slow the Japanese advance in the north, which was the B plot. The statement was to show the skeptical Western powers that China would fight with unwavering resolve and impact. The price tag meant spending manpower like confetti, as casualties were simply the cost of a glowing review in London. "We must look brave while dying," Shek concluded, beaming. "And for this, we must use our most expensive props. We will use the elite German-trained divisions as if the German-trained 88th Division were elite props." Colonel Li Ching was the most cynical stage manager in the Chinese army, and he was educated in Berlin. He knew the difference between a textbook military strategy and a suicidal theatrical gesture as he stood watching. Li stood on the outskirts of the city, his uniform impeccable, watching columns of poorly equipped conscripts. They were young men carrying antique rifles, heading straight for fortified Japanese positions supported by tanks. A truly brilliant strategy. Colonel muttered Major Chen Hao, his second in command, arriving with a lit cigarette. Chen was younger and possessed a sarcasm honed by years of surviving Kuomintang bureaucracy. And Li asked him, "Which brilliant strategy are we applauding today?" Major Li asked, his voice flat as Chen flicked ash onto the mud. The strategy of massed frontal assaults is designed to prove that Chinese bravery can overcome Japanese metallurgy. We have numbers, they have firepower. So we are trading 20 lives for one. And Shek calculates the exchange rate. He is likely calculating the exchange rate in column inches of newsprint. Li merely sighed regarding his division. His 88th Division, the pride of China, trained to execute modern warfare, was being deployed for maximum spectacle. They were the shock troops, designed to smash a hole through the lines and prevent the show from collapsing. Our orders, Li said, consulting a thin dispatch, are to secure the downtown area and expel the Japanese from enclaves. We have a huge numerical advantage, Major, which will be neutralized by the end of the week.
This strategy is suicide.
It will be used up entirely by poor coordination and the sheer cost of charging tanks with bayonets. Chen countered. We are not soldiers, Colonel, but well-drilled actors in the tragedy of national resolve, about to begin the opening act. The battle for downtown Shanghai began on August 13th, and it was a disaster. A meat grinder, executed precisely. It went according to the expectations of anyone who understood modern warfare, and the 88th Division operated well. The 88th Division, operating with precision and utilizing the limited artillery, achieved some initial breakthroughs. Li men fought like devils clearing blocks, but they were a few thousand professionals operating amidst conscripts. Those hundreds of thousands of ill-equipped conscripts had a job that seemed to be only dying convincingly. "Look at this," Chen shouted, pointing to a street choked with casualties after a failed charge on a machine gun nest. 1,000 men wasted on a single bunker, died trying to prove we are not feeble. Did the Times get a good photo? "Focus," Major Li snapped, reloading his Mauser. "Because the Japanese position is holding, and we are contained exactly. Shek achieved his first goal, so we are tied down here, drawing their forces away from Beijing, paying for it in blood." The truth was stark, despite the immense cost in manpower. The Chinese army could not dislodge the Japanese garrisons. The failure to achieve the initial objective forced the Japanese hand, resulting in a devastating change of venue. The Japanese realized that the downtown core was too costly to hold against such vast numbers, even poorly led ones. General Iwan Matsui decided on an amphibious landing 40 kilometers north of the city center to flank the Chinese. Starting on August 23rd, the Japanese landed 3 divisions with overwhelming support from naval guns and aircraft. This was the moment the Shanghai Pageant transformed into a genuine military horror show. So Li 88th Division moved. They were immediately ordered north, scrambling to block the Japanese breakthrough. And the battles were slugfests. The battles that followed were not maneuvers, but static, relentless slugfests, village by village, with no tactics. The Chinese had numerical superiority and rudimentary fortifications, but the Japanese had overwhelming firepower. The fighting coalesced around the town of Lodian, a critical road junction 9 kilometers inland. They needed logistics. Li explained to Chen, crouching behind a dilapidated mud wall, that we are denying them the roads they desperately need. Shek has realized that massed frontal attacks are bad theater. So now we fight smart, with night attacks and close quarters. There will be no artillery for the Japanese to abuse. So this new phase was tactical, brutal, and horrifyingly intimate. Lodian became an inferno of bayonets and grenades due to the constant shelling and the relentless close-quarters combat. It was here the Chinese troops gave the town its infamous nickname. They call it the Flesh Mill now. Major Chen said this one night, wiping blood from his face after they had successfully pushed the Japanese out. They lost half their company in the process. And Li agreed it is an apt description, watching his exhausted men check. We are raw material, Major, being ground down to buy time. With 300,000 men sacrificed for 3 months. It is a staggering cost for a delayed timetable. But the reviews are good, Chen said dryly, leaning against a wall. I heard a courier mention that the Daily Telegraph called our resistance unwavering determination. So Shek is pleased. The moment we stop fighting or look defeated, the foreign powers will conclude China is finished, Li said in a whisper. We must keep the show running, and we must continue to be ground, Major. Otherwise, everything is lost, Li concluded. The fighting around Lodian continued for weeks, each day costing thousands of lives, and the 88th Division bled dry. They were the expensive props Shek was determined to use up entirely. So finally, on September 15th, they withdrew. With forces decimated, the NRA withdrew from Lodian, successful only in slowing the Japanese, securing ruined countryside. The next defensive position was Dachang, 12 kilometers south, where the line was shorter and fortifications better. Despite better fortifications, the Chinese army was exhausted and demoralized. So Li informed Chen of the arrival. The Japanese will arrive in Dachang by October 1st, Li informed Chen as they oversaw the bitter retreat that day. There will be another 3 weeks of fighting, maybe 4. And then Chen asked, not needing the answer from Li. Li looked back toward the dark ruins of the Flesh Mill. Then we begin Act 2. Major Li said we must continue. We must continue the performance and prove that we have unwavering determination, even if it costs us every man left.